Welcome, everybody, to the Score Speaker Series. I'm just incredibly honored to have my friend Andy Lykens here, who's the Director of Music Services at Netflix. Andy, thank you so much for joining today.
Happy to be here, Jordan. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's just start at the beginning. What was sort of your journey in landing at Netflix 10 years ago when we first met? It was 2014.
Yeah, I'll try to give my whole background as concisely as I can. I was a trombone performance major in undergrad, and didn't quite know how to do that job. I didn't know how to make that a thing, being a trombone player. And so I wound up going to grad school at University of Miami and majored in music business. Learned about licensing. Jordan read your dad's book during that course of that. Learned about licensing, publishing, got really fascinated with it. And then back then, which is before LinkedIn and all this other stuff, I was sending my resume and I wound up at a music library. And my first job was pitching music for film, TV, and advertising in New York. So did that for 4 or 5 years. Moved to a company which at the time was called Amalgam, which now that catalog is owned by Concord. And essentially made that transition because I wanted to see what the difference was between library music and commercial music. Then I moved to a custom music house, doing yet again the same thing. So I've been in the sync world, kind of on the sell side, so to speak, always doing the creative pitching and the deals that would wind up from that pitching. Did some freelance music supervision and advertising, and then my wife and I decided to move from New York to the West Coast. And I got my recruiter call from Netflix the day before the movers came in New York. And so I wound up at Netflix shortly thereafter. And I think I basically, what I explain to people who don't work in this world is that I went from the sell side to the buy side, right? So I'd done all these different kinds of deals over the years in music sync for mostly advertising, some TV. And so Netflix needed some help in the marketing space. So
I think it's always super helpful to have somebody on the buy side that's been on the sales side. What would you say was like the biggest difference in that transition?
I think what's really interesting about it is when you're on the sell side, when you're trying to pitch something and get it to land, that's what you're thinking about all day, every day. When you're using music in something, you have so many other things to think about because, especially in the case of my work at Netflix, right? Like we're the main body of work at Netflix is like, let's create this content and let's create this marketing campaign. And so a lot of my job turned into trying to facilitate the whole operation, right? Like, how does the marketing team work with music? What are the different types of things that we do? How do those deals need to be structured? And so the buying part becomes a pretty small part of the day-to-day, I would say. So yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, I just read the No Rules Rules book, which is all about the Netflix culture. And I just imagine there's so much, it's just an incredible place to work for a lot of reasons. How has that changed and evolved since you've been there? I mean, that's a decade in a fast-paced environment, big tech company, and just doing so much more. I mean, I remember when we music supervised Chef's Table, there was only like Orange is the New Black and House of Cards. And like then with Chef's Table, I mean, you've seen just such an explosion of content.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an amazing ride, I'll say. It really is. I don't even know quite how to answer this question. It's really been amazing. I mean, my early conversations at Netflix with music folks were just trying to describe what we were doing.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't quite what they were used to with network TV promos and with film trailers, right? It's just a little bit different somewhere in between. And so these days, I feel like we just have way more of a shorthand, and we have really strong relationships with our music partners. So yeah, I would say it's nice. It's nice to be in this world where things have gone from sort of cloudy murkiness to like, okay, this is Netflix. We know these guys now.
It's amazing. Yeah, I found our first email ever from 2014 where it was just your name and then music. It was just like so awesome. Yeah. What does a typical day look like for you right now?
Hmm. Um, okay, so most of my day is working with my team. I have a team of, I think 8 folks. And they're the ones who are facilitating the use of music in the Netflix AV for marketing. So you can think about this as film trailers as a short, or I should say any kind of trailer as a shortcut, whether it's for film or series. But they create all kinds of stuff. We create social media content. We create some promotional content that lives on the platform. Um, there's really all different kinds of uses of music that happen in the marketing space, and so our team is really just working really closely with our internal business partners, and our job is to make sure that when they have an idea with music, that we get it as close to what they want as we possibly can. Sometimes we're limited by budgets or timing or artists or whatever. And really our job is to sort of help them think through and execute kind of the music piece of whatever it is they're doing. And so at any given day, we're meeting about certain projects or talking through problems or bouncing some creative ideas off of each other. It really just kind of depends on the day. Things move really fast. There's always something new. It's very exciting.
Good and time. How do you balance your team collaborating and also simultaneously dividing and conquering?
That's so funny. I was just talking about this morning. It's really difficult, actually, because when you have a bunch of folks working with different parts of the business too, because that's how we kind of split up the work. There's not a lot of cause for them to collaborate on specific projects, right? Like we wouldn't have 2 people necessarily working on a given campaign. Sometimes it happens, or whatever, somebody has to be out of the office for whatever reason. But what we do find is that, of course, we're working with a lot of the same external partners, right? So music libraries, music companies, labels, publishers, artist management. And so that's where it's helpful to kind of share knowledge and share experiences or share connections, right? It's obviously impossible to know everybody. There's so many different people in the music space. So it's really nice when you need to connect with somebody. That works really well. And then, of course, the tools and stuff that we use. So we're really, really good and really, really diligent about tracking our rights and making sure that we have that information and that we're being generally good actors. And so we work really closely on that kind of stuff too, to make sure that everything's going where it needs to go, and making sure that we're doing the best we can from a music rights perspective.
So you're communicating like all day, every day internally with your music team, as well as, people within Netflix that are in different departments. Like, how is that all on email? Is it like chat? Like, I'm just curious, like, how does such a big company even do that?
Sure. Yeah. It's all of those things, everything you can imagine, right? We use chat, we use email. Some people text message a lot. It just depends on the person. Everyone's got their own communication preferences too. Sure. So yeah.
So what's been sort of trending amongst, because I know you do so much clearance work, and I know like, what do you see? Remixes, trailerizations, covers, custom music library, like catalog, and what do you see going? I mean, all the time.
Yes. Definitely the trend is remixes right now. We see so many of these.
Why am I to guess that's like your biggest headache also?
It's not really a headache. It's a headache when it's a surprise, right? I think our goal as music folks is to try to make it so that our business partners at Netflix aren't surprised by things. And I think the interesting thing about music is that creatively, it's pretty easy to have an opinion about music and it's pretty easy to have a preference. But when it comes to actually using music in the thing, it's fairly complex. And if you don't have the direct experience kind of working through these problems on a day in, day out basis, you can get surprised by stuff pretty easily, right? Like things that are sort of second nature for you and I, Jordan, who owns what, or things in percentages or whatever. It's not so straightforward for folks who are just who think about music as this very small piece of their overall campaign. And so yeah, I would say like, for us, the remixing isn't the problem. It's just that when we bump into it and we only have a little bit of time to solve the issue, if there is some underlying rights issue with it, then it is a problem because we have to replace it or something like that, right? And so I think one of the things that we really value on my team is I don't know if the folks on this call know, but Netflix works with a lot of different trailer houses. We love the ones who communicate with us really openly and really clearly. It just makes our lives so much easier. I think it makes their lives easier too. And yeah, it just makes everything run smoother. So yeah, it's good. But I think some of the remixes are really cool. I heard a really good one, and I feel bad I'm not going to be able to credit. I can't remember who sent it to me, but there's a really good Devo remix of "Whip It" that I heard the other day. And I was like,
well, I'll tell you, it wasn't us. Yeah. So that's. By the way, just pull your mic a little bit because I feel like it's scuffing up. Yeah, perfect.
Sure.
So what's been the most surprising, I guess, trend that you've seen, other than remixes, which is obviously very real right now? Is there anything else that you were just really surprised by in the last few years?
No, I feel like it's all been good. I don't remember coming across something where it really stood out to me as being uniquely different or troubling or anything like that. So yeah, I would say generally speaking, we're used to working through all of this stuff and all the intricacies and things like that. So I think from my perspective, it's been all pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Where do you see it trending for the future?
You know, it used to be the dark female vocal cover, right? Like that was the thing for a long time, and you still see that come up once in a while. And now it's remixes. I just feel like remixes are going to stick around for a little while. I think the music industry too also has this, their catalog songs that are well known. Those are valuable copyrights for them, right? And so for them to be able to kind of exploit things like remixes and sort of give new life to these songs and a new perspective on a new song, I think it's both interesting and at the same time, it's pretty valuable for them. So I think this one will continue for a little while.
Yeah, there's billions of dollars of private equity going into those catalogs, I think, for a lot of reasons, and that being one of them. Speaking of the future, do you see that AI is going to play a big role in the future of what we're doing?
And what we're doing in music, look, I don't know. I imagine that AI will pretty much be everywhere, and I'm really just repeating what I've heard on podcasts and the like, because we don't use it at work really at all. But yes, I mean, imagine that as things progress, as it gets better and faster. But you'll see it more and more. But what I hear is right now is that like the cost to compute, so the actual compute power to do stuff with AI is really expensive. I asked somebody one time, I was like, what, can you give me like hey, you need a computer the size of X to do this type of work? And I think the answer was like, you need a city block worth of computers to really do this stuff that's really complicated, which is why you see the really big companies do it, like the Googles of the world and Apple with its $1 trillion market cap and so on and so forth. It's because it's really, really expensive to do right now. So yeah, my personal perspective is I think it'll be everywhere. But I can only speculate. I have no idea what the future holds.
Would you say it's going to be a net like positive or negative for like, is it going to help more than hurt or hurt more than help?
For humanity generally?
Yeah.
I'm an optimist with it. I think it'll be a net positive. But I can see where it could be really problematic. So it's tough. But I'm not the person to ask these things. I'm I'm no Sam Altman. Let's put it that way.
No, you're Andy. I mean, so kind of looking at just personal inspiration, who are your musical heroes and how they influence your work? And now I'm thinking about you as a trombone player, so I'm really curious where you're going to go with this.
Yeah, I love this question. So I was a big when I was really young, I was into two main artists It was the Beatles, because my dad had a bunch of old Beatles reel-to-reels that I would listen to. And then also Weird Al. I was a huge Weird Al fan. And then as I got a little older, it was more jazz stuff. And I think today I gravitate. I still listen to Beatles a lot, but I gravitate a lot to jazz. So Bill Evans, Chick Corea. I like stuff that's a little farther out. So, Kurt Elling, one of my favorite vocalists. Charlie Hunter, I love listening to, and he and Kurt Elling have been working together recently. There's definitely some trombone players in there. There's this guy named Ray Anderson. If you've never heard him, he is insane when it comes to trombone. He's worth listening to if you've never heard of him. And then of course I love, there's so much great music out there too, right? I'm a big John Mayer fan, love Kamasi Washington, Robert Glasper, Terrace Martin I really like. Let's see, who else?
Have you ever been to a Weird Al concert?
Yes, I have.
How good was it?
If you don't like Weird Al, you should go. It is just so entertaining. It is, I could not believe it. I could not believe how
he's just so amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. He really does have, the most amazing thing to me about that concert was, and if you're not familiar, he dresses up in costumes, he's dancing around, he can kick his legs up by his ears, it's really insane, and he does not miss. He hits every single note. It is unbelievable. He's incredible. Yeah.
Shout out to Weird Al. One of the great legends. Okay, I just want to move into some advice, because we have a lot of people that signed up. I'd say we kind of want to address them in a few categories: composers, people that run music companies, and then, people that are more on your side of things. But let's just think back to the people that are actually graduating now. What advice would you give somebody that is even just trying to enter into this crazy world? Where would you start?
Yeah. Okay, so I have I have sort of a general opinion about this for anybody, whatever it is you're doing, whether it's music or something else, which is try to participate in the ecosystem as soon as you can, which means, when you start off something, you're not going to be very good at it. And one of the hardest parts is learning how to get better, but you don't do that. It's just like practicing an instrument. You don't get better unless you spend time doing it every day. And it feels so painful at the beginning, even at the middle, even past the middle, even today, right? For me to do things that I've been doing for a long time, it feels painful when you're having a new learning, but it really compounds over time. And so I think the biggest thing that you can do, let's say you're a musician and you're looking to get into the sync world, or you're looking to compose, is I would just start writing every day, and I would put it out where people can hear it as often as you can. And that will be the best litmus test, I think, for your work. One is you'll be able to execute something from start to finish, right? From there's nothing and now there's something living in the world. But number two is there's a feedback loop, and people respond to it or they don't. And if you're working in a world like sync, you need people to be responding to your music because it needs to drive some emotion or whatever. And so I would say that would be the single best thing to do, is just start. Stop making up all the excuses why you're not doing the thing, and just do the thing.
So when you were in the sales side, how I assume networking was kind of everything. I mean, who and building relationships. How did you go about that when you were first starting?
This is a great question. I'm going to answer it as how should people go about it rather than how I went about it, because it took me a while to learn this one. I think that there's a way that everybody can be helpful to somebody else. And I think when people think about sales, they think about cold calls, and they think about business cards and asking the person for the thing, right? Asking for the sale, all that stuff, which is all true. That's all necessary. But I think underlying that needs to be this perspective of how am I actually helping this person, and what is the stage of our relationship? if you're talking to somebody that you've just met and you've had a decent conversation, not necessarily the best time to be like, and by the way, can you put my music in this thing, right? Because ultimately that person's problem at that moment in time is probably not that they are looking for the exact piece of music that you happen to have in your back pocket, right? And I think sort of before that is like, you don't quite understand what that problem is. And so for me, networking is it's about giving first, and it's about being helpful and thoughtful and doing it in a way that only you can do. And I went through various phases of this. Like early on, I essentially I would literally do the cold call thing. Or because I worked in New York, you could just like show up and knock on people's doors. And at the time, music libraries were all on CD. So you actually had like a physical product and you kind of leave it behind or pass it to somebody, whatever. And so I would do that. And it kind of doesn't really get you anywhere, right? Because the people don't really associate that with anything that's meaningful. But, as I went along, you just start to learn that what makes you valuable is whatever it is you bring to the table. And as a young person, I think it took me a long time to figure out what that was. And so I think part of it is figuring out what that is for yourself too. Like what is it that I'm doing that's different, that's interesting, that could be helpful to this person? And that involves really deeply understanding the person you're talking to. And so I would say if you can't really clearly define the person that you're talking to or deeply understand what problem they might be having, then you're probably not in a position to sell anything yet.
That's awesome advice. I mean, the thing that resonates the most is actually how you make somebody feel more than anything. Yeah. So if you can bring value and good energy, I think that takes you so far, especially on the pitching side. Even if that just means composers pitching to third-party companies, pitching directly to clients,
that's right,
pitching to collaborators, that's awesome. And how about going about learning the actual like rules of copyright or creative, like how to even get into producing, which I actually do think AI is going to help level that playing field for a lot of people that are creative and have ideas, can play piano but don't know how to produce. That might be a really interesting tool that we see in the next few years, I think, to get people up to that standard.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. So I need you to ask that question.
I don't even know what I was asking. I was asking about like kind of how do you learn copyright and how do you learn like how do you see that entry point?
Okay, let's talk about copyright first. There's really great books out there. I mean, you can learn copyright by reading a book. I think my question for people who are considering that is that what you want to learn? Or are you just trying to make money by being a musician? Because then you need to know how deep you need to get on the music copyright piece. If you have a basic understanding of how it works and what you're creating when you create a piece of music, and then all you really need to know is what exactly is your value in the marketplace, which essentially just comes from, like we talked about earlier, outputting more often, right? And so you're more statistically probable to have something do well if you have more stuff out there, right? Not saying it's easy, but it is somewhat simple in that sense, right? But that's why when people talk about like 100,000 new tracks on Spotify every day, it's like, man, it's that number.
It's growing.
It's like winning the lottery.
Yeah.
So I would say if your goal is to create music, then a fundamental understanding of how copyright works is enough. There's a great book. I think the author actually is Donald Moser, and it's just called Music Copyright. I usually recommend it to people because it's really approachable. He writes in a straightforward way and he focuses on music copyright. So you're not like trying to tease out all of the other different things that have copyright, like software and other IP, intellectual property. So that's a great book. And then I would say if you have a partner, like if you're working with someone like Score, these guys are experts, right? And just be active in that partnership. And so don't just deliver them the music, ask them a couple of questions about what they're doing. And I think finding a good partner in this stuff is really important if you're a musician or a composer, I should say, trying to work in this world. It's like, if you have a good partner who's taking care of the hard stuff for you, that's great. That lets you get back to creating. And I think that's what in my experience, that's a lot of what independent musicians and composers actually want, is they want somebody to do that for them and to understand for them and have the trust that they're getting that fair shake without having to really be an expert on it. Because God knows, as a musician, you have to do so many different things just to make it right. So it's like, to not add that particular thing to your plate, I think is helpful.
Were people kind to you when you were cold calling, by the way?
Depends. Some people were. It's a little bit like what I just talked about, right? Statistically, you're going to get somebody who needs you, right? So,
timing is everything.
There's a timing element for sure. But also, take the hint. If someone's not calling you back, you just got to assume that they probably don't need what you're offering. Or at least if they do need it, they're getting it from somebody who's, maybe being a little bit more thoughtful about their approach or taking more time to build a relationship. So yeah.
I still get a lot of cold calls. I try to be kind because I have a similar background to you where I started, but it is tough. Like, I don't need solar panels today. So it's like, I'm not enthusiastic about the call,
I try to be kind. I will say I used to try to respond to everybody, and I just cannot do that anymore. It's so difficult. You just get so many incoming requests, and there's just no way. And I wish there was. I think
what stands out, why I like doing stuff like you've never met somebody, they're in your inbox, and you're compelled to respond because what?
Yeah, I think, okay, you opened up this call by talking about our first email together, right? So if I get introduced to somebody by somebody that I know and trust, that stands out.
Referrals.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a huge difference. It's hard for me to pick somebody that sort of coldly reached out, and it's really because it's mostly a timing thing. Maybe I'm feeling guilty for whatever reason. Like, these are not good reasons for me to be writing back, right? It
might just be you had time. You might have just had a moment to respond. I mean, that's totally fair.
Yeah, I think the other thing, I think if you can't get an introduction, because I know that's hard, and you have to network even to get introductions, right? It's a little easier to do that at least, but it's still not easy. But I would say, like, people who went to the school that I went to, people who have some sort of affiliation, relationship, interest that's similar, they're more likely to get a response. But even so, like, most of my job these days is working with my team and managing the team. It's less this creative music supervision piece. And so a lot of the times I think, like, people assume that I can take their music and then put it in this thing, and that just doesn't really happen. It's not really.
Fun. So. No, I mean, how is your team sourcing music, and how can people participate in getting access to those is through verified, trusted partners, it sounds like.
That's right. That's right. I think most people will tell you that. It just makes it so much easier, because the other thing is, like, if we don't know you and we need you to do something for us, we don't actually know that you can execute that. And so, like we talked about with let's tie this back to the copyright thing, right? You can have people reach out to you, pitch you a song. It can be great. And then you go, great. Do you own 100% of both sides? And they don't even know what that means. And so you're like, well,
right.
If you don't know that, what am I supposed to do here? Right? Like, I need you to have some confidence there. And so the trusted partner makes a really big difference. And the other thing I think we should talk about, Jordan, is like, not to blow up anything here for you, but, like, you can have a trusted partner for a period of time and then move on and do it on your own after you've learned what you need to learn, right? It's that
it has to be a mutually beneficial partnership. I mean, so if it's not working, then absolutely try a different partner. I mean, we really, really try to only help composers and music that we believe in, that we can help. But if we can open up doors with companies like Netflix and do a good job, that's great. That means we're doing our job.
Yeah, that's right. And I think as like you said, the partnership needs to be mutually beneficial, and they change over time. And so to expect that they're always going to be the same, I think is a little unrealistic. I think you should expect that your partnership should change, and therefore you should be thinking about what you're doing day in and day out, how it's different, how it's not.
And one thing that I've really noticed with Netflix is it's just such a global company now. And so I think it's important to
Mm-hmm.
think about like not just what music is going to work that you even see on trailer, but like think
Mm-hmm.
about the world of Netflix and how
Mm-hmm.
they might need stuff from a totally different territory, which is, I think, really exciting and interesting for our roster, which is also global, to not feel like they have to fit into something that's happening necessarily just in the US.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think that it's even hard. Like, the U.S. market is really sophisticated, so it's relatively easy to find kind of whatever it is you want. But if you need something specifically from a certain country, sometimes that's not so easy to come by. And so it can even be a differentiator these days. It just kind of depends on, you know, where you are, what you're doing, and who who you're working with, your partners.
Well, this has been so much fun, Andy. Thank you for all the insight and tips and just experience shares that you did give us. Um, we appreciate it and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. It's always nice to chat with you. We love Score. You guys are great. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
But wait, I want to shout out, actually,
Yes.
I want to shout out all of our music library partners. We have a bunch, right? Netflix works with as many music companies as exist. It feels like sometimes like there's always a reason to know another person because it's always helpful. There's no finite amount of content from Netflix. Um, and what I will say is production music libraries are seriously one of the most important things to our day to day. We would not be able to do this job without the music. It's so great. I mean, I'm a nerd for it because I started out in
Yes,
library music. And
you know.
so it's been quality for a long time. And I know all the effort that goes into making this stuff and recording it and mixing it and all of that stuff. And it sounds so good. And now we have all kinds of great options because of companies like Score, who are just, I don't know, just great partners, and they make it such a breath of fresh air from having to deal with. Sometimes it can be tricky dealing with other major labels and publishers, so it's nice to have folks who can execute at a really high level.
Well,
It's
we
great.
are so grateful. And again, going back to those early days of Netflix and seeing where it is today, it is beyond impressive. What a cool rocket ship to be on, Andy. And we wish you just continued success and look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. Likewise, Jordan. I appreciate the
Okay.
opportunity.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Ready? Bye bye.